and I'm really excited to be able to do this. This is something different for us. A lot of times we're just so swamped with Earth Day activities, especially during Earth Week, that we don't have the opportunity to really kind of delve into why recycling is so important. And with the pandemic right now, it is more important than it ever has been. And I think because the focus has been so much on our safety, as it should be, we have tended to forget until recently all of the things that is actually being impacted by the lack of recycling that has actually occurred over the past year. So, many people say, well, why is it important to recycle? Well, any given year, we deal with that question and we kind of turn it back to them and say, well, why is it important for you to recycle? You've come to me for something. What is it? Why did you come? What is your reasoning behind that? Well, this year, especially, I think we have seen why the importance of recycling has come to be. Unfortunately, we have seen a huge increase in our waste, most of that being plastic. And we'll get into plastics and why they are the ugly part of recycling right now. But certainly, the increase alone in solid waste was already starting to happen before this pandemic came upon us. We, back in the 80s, early 90s, we had about 2.5 pounds per person a day in waste. If you recycled, obviously you had less of that. Up until the pandemic, we had actually gotten to 4 pounds per person per day. So, although our education of recycling and the importance and the fact that we don't want landfills in our backyard because who wants to smell that should have led us down the path of finding alternatives, we as consumers and the ability of the Amazons and the Walmarts and all those wonderful places that we love to shop enabled us to, instead of decreasing our footprint in the waste industry, we've actually increased it to 4 pounds. Well, during the pandemic, partly due to all the plastic materials, but also because we were at home a lot more. So we were eating at home and we were buying things at home. And, we were also building and doing things to make ourselves more comfortable. We increased that by 25 to 30%. So we went from 4 pounds a day per person, which is an awful lot of waste, to about 6 or 7 pounds a day per person. Now, yes, some of that could have been recycled. So if you're an active recycler, you probably didn't have that same impact. But if you weren't, then you generated, again, 30% more trash last year than you ever have. And it sure we'll see the same this year because so many of us are still in the position that we were in, that we aren't going out as much and we are working from home still. So it will be interesting to see what that impact continues to have on our solid waste. At the same time, we saw a decrease in recycling. Much of that decrease obviously had to do with the safety of personnel, but it also had to do with the fact that many of those businesses were shutting down like other businesses because they had to ensure that their employees were safe. If you think about how COVID was actually passed, and I know we've been told many different things, in the beginning, we were told that it sat on items like plastics and other materials that we would normally recycle longer than it did even in the air. So, as a business, it was something they had to think about. It was something I had to think about. How can I keep my employees safe? How can we ensure that recycling still continues? On top of that, we saw revenues decrease. So those revenues decreased, and many cities and towns had to start looking at ways to save money. And one of the ways they saw to save money was through recycling. So many cities and towns, due in part to the pandemic, mostly to the pandemic over the past year, have actually had to let their recycling go. So what does that mean? Does that mean that recycling no longer matters to us? No, not at all. And we're going to discuss, in fact, how it does matter and why today, more than ever, recycling is so important. But part of that is you need to know the history. So we know that recycling has been around for years and years and years. As a matter of fact, recycling's been around since before any of us was born, right? Because we would repurpose materials. We would break something down and we would make it into something else. So really, it was a reusable society. We actually created what we're trying to get back to, which is a circular society. Well, for many years, we got away from that. So by doing away from that, we had to come up with ways to stop utilizing all of our natural resources. So we went back to looking at recycling. So in the early 70s, we came up with this Earth Day idea. And a senator from Wisconsin realized, hey, we got to stop throwing all this stuff away. There's value, and we are losing our land and we're losing our natural resources. So we started pouring some money into recycling. Well, that was great. And we were able to recycle some basic things. But what happened from there is that it continued to grow, and recycling grew worldwide. Well, that was very beneficial to us as a nation because we were able to then take the materials we were interested in keeping that we found value. And when we didn't want the rest of them, we put them on a cart in a big box and we shipped that off to China. So for years, for 25 plus years, we sent not only recyclable material, but our trash out of the Pacific Rim over to China, to the point where 40% of what was actually exported from the Pacific Rim was recycling. Most people have no clue that that is how much recycling means to this country. Fast forward 5 years ago, and China decided, yeah, I don't want to take your trash any longer. So I am going to start setting limits on how much contamination can be in it. Everybody thought, oh no, they're not going to do that. And excuse me, it wasn't 5 years ago. It was about 10 years ago that that happened. Everybody said, oh, they're not going to do that. And then no one did anything. We continued to ship our stuff. We continued to send it over there because we would get all those storage containers back empty. We'd get all those storage containers sent to us with all those materials. Well, we didn't want to send them back empty. That would be a huge loss. So we sent them back filled with our recycling. So as the years went by and no changes were made, China said, well, we warned you. So we are no longer going to take any of your material if it's contaminated. Well, if any of you look at recycling, you know that that is not in any way possible. So in order for us to effectively deal with that, we would have to go through piece by piece. So what happened is we went from having this opportunity to ship whatever we wanted. So we said, hey, we'll collect whatever we want, to not being able to ship at all. We created a perfect storm. But that just occurred over the past 5 years. So what have we been doing since 1970? Why have we not been creating the manufacturing and the opportunities in this country? The biggest reason is cost, right? We can send it over there, it costs very little, we'll still make some money, and everything's fine. Well, that isn't the case anymore. So we have to start looking at the impacts of not only what recycling does in this country, but how we can actually start utilizing the materials that we're collecting in this country. So fast forward to COVID. We've lost those opportunities. We've lost the ability to send it to China. And oh, by the way, the entire world has been impacted by the same thing. So they're shutting down just like we are. And now we're in trouble because guess what? A lot of our products are made from recycled material. So before I go on, this is really hard, Kelly. Is it possible to see some faces? Because I was going to put up a pop quiz, true or false. And I'm used to kind of interactive situations. So are there people to interact with, Jody, Kelly, anyone? Oh, can't hear you, Jody.
Yes, and I'll stop spotlighting your video too.
Okay. Okay, so we are going to do a little quiz, and I promise nobody's going to be graded. It'll just be something fun for us to look at. And then we'll watch a video about a brief history of plastics and kind of regroup. So it would be great. Again, please, there's no stupid questions, anything. So any questions that want to be asked, I'm much more into interaction than just full presentation, because it helps me to see what you know or want to know. So, okay, let me share my screen. Let's see, files. Okay, Kelly, maybe you could help me, because this is the first time I've done this, and so maybe I've done it wrong. I have 2 videos pulled up for the other, but my quiz is actually on PowerPoint. Can I do that?
You should be able to. Is it open?
It's on my, yes, let me go in the back and open it. Here we go.
So when you hit share screen, it'll have different options that you can select, and you should be able to select your PowerPoint from those.
Okay.
It's at the bottom of the Zoom. There's a list of icons. It should be down there where you can share it.
Ah, there we go. Thank you. That's what it was. It just wasn't open. All right, Jennifer, good to see you. Like I said, please jump in. Melissa, and phone number, and I won't read your phone number aloud. But this is just a little quiz, and it is truly just meant for fun. And yes, some of the questions may be more difficult than others, but I promise it's just kind of leading me to what we're talking about. Okay. So the first question is, the recycling symbol on the bottom of plastics means it can be recycled. True or false?
Not sure.
Not sure. Okay, not sure.
It depends on what the number is in the middle, right?
Okay, Jennifer's shaking her head. Is that a false then, or false? Okay. You are right. The recycling symbol on the bottom of plastics has really nothing to do with recyclability. That is the biggest misnomer and the biggest marketing mistake ever made. It actually means, plastic specifically, the type of plastic it is. So your 1 through 7 is actually the type of plastic. It has nothing to do with its recyclability. So for years, we focused on, oh, if it has that symbol and it has a number in it, you go ahead and recycle it. Well, as we got to the point of recognizing that we could no longer ship all those materials over to China, we really had to assess what we had set up in this country to allow us to be able to recycle. So 1s and 2s are predominantly made from virgin plastics. It means they haven't been, run through. They're the first run. So they are fairly easy to recycle. A 5 isn't as good, but they are made into toothbrushes and your yogurt tubs. And a lot of times that's what they are, even when you're recycling them. The others are much more difficult to recycle, and a little surprised that most people don't know, because unfortunately, many people that have curbside recycling may have something that says 1 through 7. Well, guess what? 6 is polystyrene. 6 is virtually impossible to recycle unless you truly bring it to a plastics facility. So for all of those people that have been throwing their 6s, and unfortunately over the past 2 years specifically, there are 3s, you don't generally see 4s, and 7s. The likeliness of them truly finding an end home as a recycled product is very slim. 1s and 2s.
So you said 4, 5, and 6?
4, 5, 6, and 7.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So basically, or excuse me, 3, 4, 6, and 7. 1, 2, and 5 are fairly easy to find an outlet. And 5 was just added in. But we will talk about some exciting news in the end that's specific to Indiana that will make all the difference in the world when it comes completely online. So stay tuned. exciting recycling news at the end.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So if you throw those in there, do they have some kind of sorter when they pick up your, no?
So, well, that's not true. When they do pick up your material, yes, they go to a materials recovery facility. We refer to it as a MRF in the industry. And so depending on who your hauler is, will depend on how advanced that MRF is. In our community, both Rays and Republic have a pretty advanced facility. Best Way has a somewhat mechanized facility, but it is still also run a lot by hand. Now, there are, of course, always people in these facilities, regardless of how mechanized they are. It's just a matter of how quickly they can get through the material. So one of the things, and I should have put this in the quiz, but I hate to say it because it's what upsets people the most, so I have to guard myself, is that just because you put something into the recycling bin does not mean that it's recycled.
Yeah.
And that is one of the most difficult things for people to understand. So what we did when we opened up our facility is we took the most minimal amount of recycling that we knew could be recycled. And it wasn't that we didn't want to take all the other stuff. Of course we do. But it's that we wanted to educate the public on what truly can find a home in Indiana. And so when somebody puts in a lot of contaminants in their recycling, and then your neighbor puts in a lot of contaminants, and then Paul down the road puts in a lot of contaminants, and Jane does too, they have a right to just bring that load straight to the landfill. So that's where we get into wish cycle. So that's why it's so important to truly know what can be recycled. And again, just because your bin says it doesn't mean that it's getting recycled. It means that's what was in the contract when that was set up 5 or 10 years ago.
Oh.
So it's a shame, but it's true. Okay, next question. Plastics contribute to the climate crisis.
Sure, why not?
Okay, we're going with true. Absolutely. So plastics are predominantly made out of oil. It is said by 2050, by 2050, we will have 20% of our oil going directly to the manufacturing of plastics. And 15% of carbon dioxide, which we know is a bad gas, will actually also be released because of that process. So plastics contribute a large problem to the climate crisis. Now, I chose the climate crisis because if I had said, does it contribute to the problems in the ocean or problems in waterways, you all would have said, yes, because we know we've talked about its impacts on fishing and all of those things that we're seeing every day. But the truth is that it's even deeper than that. So with that, we are going to watch this really cool video. Okay, maybe.
You might have to stop screen sharing and then restart with the new video. Sometimes you have to do that.
Okay, all right, so we'll stop there and we'll come back to our quiz after we watch this video. Okay, stop share. Screen share. Oh, and I probably need to minimize that. And
Your samples are precious, and turnaround time is critical.
are you guys seeing it or are you just
We
hearing
can hear
it?
it, but we can't see it.
Okay, that's what happens a lot of times.
Yep.
Okay, so let's try that again. And there we are. And share. Now can you see it?
Yep.
Great. We're gonna skip this ad and
Today, plastics are everywhere. All of this plastic originated from one small object that isn't even made of plastic. For centuries, billiard balls were made of ivory from elephant tusks. But when excessive hunting caused elephant populations to decline in the 19th century, billiard balls makers began to look for alternatives, offering huge rewards. So, in 1863, an American named John Wesley Hyatt took up the challenge. Over the next 5 years, he invented a new material called celluloid, made from cellulose, a compound found in wood and straw. Hyatt soon discovered celluloid couldn't solve the billiard ball problem. The material wasn't heavy enough and didn't bounce quite right, but it could be tinted and patterned to mimic more expensive materials like coral, tortoiseshell, amber, and mother of pearl. He had created what became known as the first plastic. The word plastic can describe any material made of polymers, which are just large molecules consisting of the same repeating subunit. This includes all human-made plastics, as well as many of the materials found in living things. But in general, when people refer to plastics, they're referring to synthetic materials. The unifying feature of these is that they start out soft and malleable and can be molded into a particular shape. Despite taking the prize as the first official plastic, celluloid was highly flammable, which made production risky. So inventors began to hunt for alternatives. In 1907, a chemist combined phenol, a waste product of coal tar, and formaldehyde, creating a hardy new polymer called Bakelite. Bakelite was much less flammable than celluloid, and the raw materials used to make it were more readily available. Bakelite was only the beginning. In the 1920s, researchers first commercially developed polystyrene, a spongy plastic used in insulation. Soon after came polyvinyl chloride, or vinyl, which was flexible yet hardy. Acrylics created transparent, shatterproof panels that mimicked glass. And in the 1930s, nylon took center stage, a polymer designed to mimic silk, but with many times its strength. Starting in 1933, polyethylene became one of the most versatile plastics, still used today to make everything from grocery bags to shampoo bottles to bulletproof vests. New manufacturing technologies accompanied this explosion of materials. The invention of a technique called injection molding made it possible to insert melted plastics into molds of any shape where they would rapidly harden. This created possibilities for products in new varieties and shapes, and a way to inexpensively and rapidly produce plastics at scale. Scientists hoped this economical new material would make items that once had been unaffordable accessible to more people. Instead, plastics were pushed into service in World War II. During the war, plastic production in the United States quadrupled. Soldiers wore new plastic helmet liners and water-resistant vinyl raincoats. Pilots sat in cockpits made of plexiglass, a shatterproof plastic, and relied on parachutes made of resilient nylon. Afterwards, plastic manufacturing companies that had sprung up during wartime turned their attention to consumer products. Plastics began to replace other materials like wood, glass, and fabric in furniture, clothing, shoes, televisions, and radios. Versatile plastics opened up possibilities for packaging, mainly designed to keep food and other products fresh for longer. Suddenly, there were plastic garbage bags, stretchy plastic wrap, squeezable plastic bottles, takeaway cartons, and plastic containers for fruit, vegetables, and meat. Within just a few decades, this multifaceted material ushered in what became known as the plastics century. While the plastics century brought convenience and cost-effectiveness, it also created staggering environmental problems. Many plastics are made of non-renewable resources, and plastic packaging was designed to be single-use, but some plastics take centuries to decompose, creating a huge buildup of waste. This century will have to concentrate our innovations on addressing those problems by reducing plastic use developing biodegradable plastics, and finding new ways to recycle existing plastic. So let's get started. Visit ed.ted.com/endwaste. Not only can you educate yourself on...
So it's fascinating when we really understand where plastics came from, right? We were actually saving the environment. We were saving animals. We were working to try and create something good. And I'm not saying plastic isn't good, because plastic has done a lot of good. But now we fast forward the 100 years and we recognize that we are actually impacting the environment. And not only are we impacting the environment, but we're impacting those same animals that we were trying to save. It's really fascinating when we talk about, be careful what you wish for, be careful what you, look for. Because the fact is, we are even ingesting these same plastics. We use toothpaste that has these plastic molecules in them because we want our teeth to be brighter, or we want the plaque to be gone. So there is plastic in the things that we're actually eating, which then in turns to, you have impacts on your brain, we have impacts in our own bodies because of plastics. So it's not just the fish, which by 1950, I keep saying 1950, I'm apparently living back in the days. It's because I'm working on a prom in the 1920s for this weekend. So, but in 2050, they're actually saying there will be more plastic in the sea than there actually will be fish. So if we don't make these changes now, where will we be? And to make matters worse, we have COVID. Every bit of the PPE that is being created and that we use every day, less you use obviously reusable materials, is made from plastic polymers. There has been a 70% increase in the use of plastic as medical waste and only a 1% increase in the recyclability. Because of course, most people don't have the ability to recycle these things. Of course, follow me on Facebook this week because I'm showing some cool things that they're doing over in Europe with this stuff. But in general, as a mass recycled product, we don't have the ability in this country to do that. But I mentioned a bright spot, right? So in Indiana, in Ashley, Indiana, there's a company called Brightmark, and they are coming online, and it is going to have a huge impact in our ability to recycle all types of plastics in the state of Indiana and beyond, because they are not only going to take plastics ones and twos, but they are going to take all plastics, and they're going to be able to take that material and they are going to be able to actually make it into a diesel that doesn't have the environmental impacts that other diesel materials have, because it is going to be a cold process instead of a hot process. So if you're at all interested in that, please visit their website at Brightmark. It's filled with information, and we will be certainly talking about it over the coming months because it should hopefully open up a lot of opportunity for plastic recycling, certainly in central Indiana, but across the Midwest and beyond. They are not the only company that is doing this. There are several that are opening up across our nation. So hopefully we're going to move forward. Difference is, do we call that recycling? There's many people that prefer us to actually recycle the material to be able to reuse it so that we aren't using those native products. So that is not natural products. So that is something to bear in mind. So let's go back to our quiz. Okay. Okay, so paper is the most recycled material. True or false? Jennifer, you're going to have to jump in, or Melissa, somebody.
False.
False. Excellent. It is false. The most recycled material is actually steel. And steel has seen a major crisis as well, because when I mentioned that we were no longer also shipping things to China, we also started to put a big tariff on steel over the past couple of years. So I won't get into any political discussions here, but I will say that the benefit of recycling in our own country is the benefit to be able to use our own material. And so the most recycled material is steel because we find it in everything we probably use that's not plastic. We drive around in it. If you ride a bicycle, you may ride around on it. You know, almost everything that isn't plastic is made from some form of steel. So that is something to bear in mind when we are talking about where these materials actually come from within our world. There is so much connectivity that so many of us would never understand unless we worked in it day to day. And so these impacts are far greater than just, well, this is going to be a 5% increase on that. Well, no, it means that we can't get the recycled materials we need. So then the downstreams and all of those processes together, which brings us to our next very important question of, oh, not right order, hold that thought. Is glass is the most difficult product to recycle, true or false? How many people have curbside recycling on this call? Okay, Jody does. Jeff, you do? Okay. Okay, well, if you have curbside recycling, you are very lucky because in our county, glass is allowed in curbside recycling. At my facility, glass is allowed, but we ask you to separate it. The main reason why we ask you to separate it is because glass needs to be a completely homogenized piece of material in order to be recycled. It can have no contaminants whatsoever. So imagine when you put that glass into your recycling bin with everything else and, oh, dang, that bottle shattered. Do you think that glass can still be recycled? No, it can't. So those things we have to really bear in mind when we're thinking about glass recycling. But the answer to this is false. Plastic is actually the most difficult product to recycle for all the reasons that I mentioned before. So many things are made out of plastic, but they're made out of hard plastics. We also tell you the plastic 1s and 2s are easy to recycle, and so go ahead and throw them in. But our plastic bags are plastic 1s and 2s, and I tell you all the time, you can't recycle those. The reason why is because of how we recycle them. Because of those mechanized machines can't have you jamming up your plastic bags into their processes because that can cause millions of dollars worth of damage. So plastic is actually the most difficult product to recycle. We need to change that, especially with all that PPE we're finding. This is the important, it got out of sequence. So back to my important message about what can and cannot happen when we see a shortage of things. So the pandemic caused an aluminum can shortage. True or false? True?
I'm going to guess true.
Okay, Jennifer said true, Kelly said true. Okay, if you're guessing true, I'm throwing you on the spot. Do you have an idea why?
I thought the plants shut down for a while.
That was a big part. Plant shut down, but the even bigger part was what else did we have to do but consume beer when we were sitting at home? So our consumption of beer and soda started going through the roof. And when many people would actually go out and be able to get their craft beer and be able to get it out of a tap, they were no longer able to do that. So there was literally a run on canned beer and soda. Well, no one saw that coming. And so that stockpile was not able to be generated. We're seeing that unfortunately in electronics right now with semiconductors. And so there was a huge shortage. So who benefited? Well, not benefited, but who saw it and was able to profit? Well, the Molsons and the Coors and the Anheuser-Busch's of the world, they were able to go in and get all they needed. Well, that left all of those small craft beer companies scrambling and are still scrambling today. So if you have a favorite craft beer that you can't find right now, or a favorite soda even, because even Coca-Cola is having a problem, it is because of the fact that there was so much consumption and the facility shut down. And I mentioned that the recycling was stopped in a lot of communities. And of course, in many communities, we have a bottle law where you have to bring back that material. Well, those shut down too. So we created a perfect storm because 80% of those cans are made from recycled aluminum, 80%. So what I tell everybody now is anything you can get your hands on, make sure you recycle it. I wash the heck out of anything I have that's aluminum, and I get it recycled. If you have things that wouldn't normally be able to fit in your bin and you think, well, that's not worth it bringing it to your local scrapyard. Yeah, maybe you don't want the 50 cents, but trust me, the country needs that aluminum. So go ahead and make a point of bringing it to that scrapyard. So it's a really difficult thing. And again, it's something most of us would have never considered. Oh, and bicycles. Good luck getting a bicycle because a lot of that is made from aluminum. A lot of those bicycles are made overseas. So if they're not stuck on a ship that's also, got tipped over into the ocean, they are still sitting in the Suez, or they don't have aluminum to make either because they have the same problem because those factories all work together. So it is fascinating when we think about a global economy truly affecting a beer manufacturer, a local beer manufacturer in Greenwood, Indiana. And it does. So all because we need more recycling. All right, our next question. This pushes me towards some of our electronic and e-waste. There is more gold in a ton of e-waste than in a ton of gold ore. And remember, a ton is what, 2,000 pounds? If we think of e-waste is mainly made up of plastics. So is that true or false? Don't know? Well, let me tell you. It is true. And I have to admit, I was fascinated by this fact. That's why I threw it in there. So there is 100 times more gold in a ton of e-waste than a ton of gold ore. So I know, of course, gold is in e-waste. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we recognize that it needs to be recycled. But it also contains other precious metals, such as platinum and cobalt. And then, of course, we have our rare earth minerals. So we don't just do it because the state of Indiana tells us we have to, although that's the reason we give people. But one of the main purposes behind it is that we need those materials because those materials can run out. And if there is truly 100 times more e-waste in gold in e-waste, then how much work is it to get what we need for that? And it's just sitting there. If we just throw it into the landfill, it is truly just sitting there to rot, to never be used unless we decide to go in and harvest that landfill, which some countries do. So it truly is a greater purpose than I'm a tree hugger who feels it's the right thing to do. When you truly understand the importance of the things that we recycle. Okay, so next question. Ooh, this is another one of my favorites. What cardboard can be recycled? All right, everybody got that one. That is a big fat false. Water weakens the fiber and makes it brittle, which decreases the value. So my next question is, how many of you put out your recycling and put the cardboard in it regardless of what the weather is? Yep. So what did I say about the fact that just because your recycling is collected doesn't mean it actually gets recycled? I guarantee you that the loads that are sopping wet with the cardboard as they go through, most of those loads are not recycled. So think about that the next time you're going to put out your materials. If it's a pouring day and you decide to put it out the night before, just hold on to it. Hopefully you have recycling more than once a week. And if you don't, come on down to my facility. Because the fact is that on a dry day, I mean, what, I'm 10 miles from any given, area in our county, or, 15. So if you really want to make sure that things are getting recycled, bring it down, because they aren't. If they're wet, they aren't. They're being collected, but they aren't being recycled. And by the way, there's pretty good value in cardboard. Okay, so this is going to be another screen share, because this is why we're talking. So all the things I've mentioned today, I've said there's other pieces to the puzzle. And when we think of recycling, we think of linear. We just think of a straight line. We recycle it and then it's made into something else. But really what we want to do is back what our great grandparents did, which was we looked at it, we said we can no longer use it, but how can I give it value again? And that is a way simple form of talking about the circular economy. So with that, we should all be able to say, recycling is an example of a best practice in the circular economy. True or false? False.
Oh, okay.
It is not a best practice. It is there, but it is the last piece of it. And let me show you why. Okay. Let's see if it's there. I tell you, this doesn't like to easily cooperate with me. Okay, it's up, but it won't. Oh, there we go. Okay, can you guys see that? Okay, so I'm going to make it bigger, hopefully, and hopefully you're going to, can you see that?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so wow, that's confusing. And this would take us 2 days to go through. But what I want to point out to you is what I mentioned. So when you talk about the circular economy, there's renewables, which I just mentioned, by taking those fuels, taking that plastic and making it into fuel. We have waste through anaerobic digestion. There's so many different things. But let's look at the collection side of the materials that we would deal with every day. So when we look at that, we recognize that the best way to speak about the circular economy is what so many people grew up with. We take that material, we fix that material, and we reuse that material. Now, so many of us say, I'm not going to fix my printer. It's far cheaper to go out and buy a new one. Well, right now, good luck if you need an electronic part and you don't try and fix it, because all of those things have been impacted by consumerism. So we are recognizing that we have to be able to create a more circular economy. And cardboard in our state is actually a wonderful example of this. Pratt Industries not only builds the box, they deliver the box, they then pick up the box, they remanufacture the box if they have to, and they start the process again. So many companies are recognizing the need for this. So really, when you talk about recycling, and you can't see it, unfortunately, or I can't see it, but hopefully you can, it's actually the last piece of it, because it's more like, oh, geez, it's really worn out. And we're going to talk about that in our last question. So there's really not much else to do with it. So let's recycle it. But before that, can we maintain it? Who cares if my bicycle is 15 years old? It still works. It still has 2 wheels. Let me continue with it. Can we redistribute it? Let's look at how many nonprofits in our community are asking for help. Hey, we don't want something new, but can you donate a coat? Can you donate a blanket? If you want to donate a new one, that's great, but it doesn't have to be. It's new to you. And then, of course, the whole refurbished. I mean, just go into Franklin. There are so many wonderful stores now that have furniture that's real, made out of wood, that people have refurbished that we're going to use for the next 50 years. So we continue to see that. We see that on the TV all the time. We all watch the shows, rehab houses and how to remake our furniture. So we are recognizing the importance of a circular economy. We've just never called it that. But as a whole, we have these companies that are literally getting tax breaks. They're for-profit companies, but they're called bee companies. And I love it because I think of a bee buzzing around, right? We want to save the bees. But these bee companies are all actually for-profit companies, but they give back to their communities. They work on a circular economy, and they're here to help the environment. They may not even be an environmental company, but they recognize the importance of the environment in the circular economy. So many, you're going to hear this. If you haven't heard about this before, this is the wave of the future. I know if you follow at all what's going on in Indianapolis with the Indiana Recycling Coalition, if you listen to any of the business, that Sunday business show, they talk about it a lot. We have so much manufacturing in Indiana. We actually have a wonderful amount of recycling manufacturers in Indiana. This circular economy will drive business and will allow us to stop putting those materials in the landfill, create jobs, and continue to use what we have in front of us instead of having to go to those natural resources. And people are realizing this. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation, this is a great resource. They actually have a whole class on this that I've actually taken, again, days. But this is a really good infographic that kind of explains it to you. It explains why, our solar energy, if you look at what's going on with our infrastructure, both across the country, but in the state of Indiana, we're adding more electronic stops for our vehicles because there aren't going to be gas-powered vehicles being made in the next 10 years. That is not what is happening in this country. We are moving forward, whether people want us to or not. So we're going to have to figure this out, and we're going to have to recognize how this can be done, because it's not the way we think right now, and it's not the way we live. So I'm going to stop that share unless anybody has any questions. I know I keep moving fast, but I'm going to stop that share. We're going to go back to our last questions on our quiz. Okay. So this is our last question, and it kind of parlays into what I just said about other options and things that you don't think about. So Goodwill recycles textiles. True or false?
Does it depend on the definition of recycle? They reuse, they redistribute. And I don't know if you donate something to them that isn't of good quality, what do they do with it?
So true or false?
I wouldn't be shocked if they threw it in the trash, because I know that there's some clothing manufacturers that won't donate clothes and they throw them out in the dumpster instead of donating to people.
Yeah, just don't even get me started on that. They can take a tax deduction.
Oh,
It is very true.
okay.
So everybody thinks only give Goodwill things that are in good condition, right? Because Goodwill resells. The fact is, a large amount of what Goodwill does is actually recycling. Goodwill is probably one of the largest recyclers you're going to find in this country, because what do they do with the things that people bring them in that's broken? Can you imagine what their cost would actually be if they had to pay for the trash that would be generated? So the way in which they keep their dollars down and they can give back to their programs is actually through recycling. So we always tell people that call us and they say, but my clothing has holes in it, or I only have one shoe. We say, bring it to Goodwill. Well, Goodwill won't take it. They absolutely will. They get paid to textile recycle. They also happen to love single shoes, because there's a lot of people in third world countries that actually only have one foot. We don't want to think about it, but it's true. And if they don't only have one foot, they don't care whether their shoes match or not if they have shoes. So they actually have a huge need for single shoes, believe it or not. So if you ever have the opportunity to go visit the center that's actually in Greenwood, off of Emerson, it is fascinating, and you will see how much recycling they actually do. So they are a perfect example of a company that is going to explode in its ability once that Ashley, Indiana Brightmark comes online completely, because they have so many hard plastics that right now is very difficult with China being closed off to get rid of. And they run into problems and they run into costs. They will no longer have to worry about that. But textile recycling is actually huge. So Kelly, back to your comment, that's exactly why they do what they do. They don't want somebody to copy their products, and they want to be able to just take it as a tax write-off. So instead of donating it, and because our deductions have changed and business deductions are different, they take it as a loss. It's very unfortunate. Okay, so these are 2 bonus questions. I don't expect you to know them. I can honestly say I wouldn't have known it if I didn't look it up. So please, by all means, this is just meant for fun. Okay, well, I wouldn't have known this one. What is the most profitable recycling material? Most profitable.
E-waste.
E-waste? Kelly, what do you think? Plastics,
Steel.
steel? Okay, Jennifer, how about you? Aluminum. Yes, aluminum is the most profitable recycling material. Think about it. Everybody collects cans, right? So it is one of the easiest things to actually be able to receive dollars for. Unfortunately, Kelly, you may have been right. I'm going to actually be able to use 1950 in this example. You may have been right in 1950 because so many of our things were made from steel. So our washers, our dryers, even our refrigerators, all of those things. Nowadays, a large portion of those things are actually made from plastic. So the white goods, as we used to know them as, that people used to love to get a hold of because there was so much value in them. Now there's hardly any value in them. So aluminum is the most profitable. Very proud of you, Jennifer. Okay. This last one, if you get this one, then you can just take my job. Okay. Oh, here we go. What is the world's most recycled material? And I can tell you it is nothing that we have mentioned.
Concrete.
You are very close, Jody.
Asphalt.
Asphalt. Yes. Now my mind would have never gone there. Are you an engineer in the past?
No, but you go around and you see all these highways being ripped up with a giant pile of concrete, and they're grinding it up, and I'm thinking,
Yeah.
who knows?
Yeah. So asphalt is actually recycled at a rate of 80% and reused worldwide. Pretty amazing and pretty awesome, actually, if you think about it. So now, of course, we've probably driven on some of those roads, and I don't know how well it holds up, but hey, it's recycled. We also know that we have the ability to put in tires and do some different plastic polymers. And as a matter of fact, in Australia, they've actually been using some of that PPE waste to put in their asphalt. So they've obviously been, been constructing the plastic to be able to add. So I hope this has been somewhat insightful as to why recycling is so important, and especially recycling right. The benefits far outweigh the fact that it may take a little extra effort, although for most of us, it really doesn't. It just means an extra container. But I'm open to any questions. Again, I like interactive conversation. It makes it easier. If you had to watch a PowerPoint presentation, which I could have put this all in, but it would have been kind of boring. And I wouldn't have seen how much knowledge you have. So,
Jessie, I have a garage full of phone systems for my wife's office, old computers, laptops. What's the best way or best place to take them to recycle them?
okay, if you have things like TVs and monitors with those computers, then I would say Recycle Force. Going to be your least cost, and they can take everything. If you only have because I don't know how many we're talking about.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, Goodwill can take monitors because of the way our system is set up. So they work with Dell. It does not have to be a Dell monitor. Does not have to work. Does not have to be from this century even. But they have a program that allows them to take monitors. So if you wanted to bring all the other stuff to me and bring Goodwill your monitors, you could do that as well. But if you wanted to do it in one fell swoop, then I would recommend, are you in Greenwood, Jody?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
Yes. So will you take laptops that have, obviously the monitors built in?
Yeah, that's a little different just because most people don't get rid of that, that piece. So we obviously take that. We are not, it has a lot to do with those elements. And one of the biggest elements is lead. And so of course, that's one of the most difficult things to get rid of. If I have to be very honest, I am 100% proponent of obviously recycling e-waste for all the reasons why I showed you in this slide. I am not necessarily a proponent of worrying about the TVs and monitors, because what happens is we don't have an easy way to deal with the lead in this country and actually across the world. And so those TVs and monitors end up being sitting in warehouses for years and years until somebody figures out what to do with them or can get the process through, and no one's monitoring it. In a landfill, we know that the leachate, which is the material that drips down, is monitored. So
the tube TVs really at this point, have no value in the recycle market.
Oh gosh, no, they've always had a cost. The only thing is that the value in e-waste was so great that we were able to take in the tube TVs at a much lower cost because we would get value back from the other. But the cost of recycling tube TVs, I mean, they expected them to be gone and they're nowhere near gone.
Yeah.
And so the cost just continues to go up and up because there is no opportunity, and because of all the people that have improperly taken in material. So they have been fined. Solid waste districts have been fined. We have been blessed, but that's why your end stream is so important. You have to know everybody because in other states, they have actually fined solid waste districts for having their televisions sit in these warehouses.
So you will not take tube TVs anymore, even for a fee?
No, we stopped doing that actually at the beginning of the pandemic because we had some contractual things. It also has to do with the fact of how to get them out of your vehicles.
Yeah.
We may start in 2022. It'll all depend on what our contract looks like. The blessing is, again, we have a fair amount of organizations that take them for less cost than we do. So that's the benefit.
Broken flat screen TVs, Goodwill would take them?
Is it a TV or a monitor?
It's a flat screen TV.
Nope, they will not. So
but they will take a flat screen monitor.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And so the TV would have to go to Recycle Force, and I want to say it's $10 or $15 for that. So, and Recycle Force is actually going to be one of the organizations that is creating hub for Brightmark. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens over the next year with all of that. So, any other questions? Okay, well, I thank you all. I hope you learned something, and please, by all means, if you have any other questions, reach out, visit our website, jcrd.org. You can find my email. If you have questions that you want to ask directly, of course, follow Facebook. We try and do some fun things that maybe you wouldn't know, like the fact that a 4-day work week helps the environment. I'm just putting that out there for my bosses. No. No. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Jessie.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And, again, thank you for hosting and supporting us. So.
All right. Happy Earth Day, everybody.
Yes. Happy Earth Day.